last
4 years.
5 years.
Yeah, yeah.
It's been truly a pleasure, and I think we make a great team. So I'll turn it over to Jimmy. He's going to talk about a tool that you can use for grazing.
And I'd echo what Chris said, that it is a joy to work with Chris and Ray. And in fact, this is my term, and I call it the Forage Dream Team, because it doesn't say anything about me, but it says a lot about what it's like to work with Ray and Chris. So the topic that I want to address is actually a spreadsheet model. It's publicly available. I say the paint's still wet on it because I find an error or two, but it is the Kentucky NRCS GRAZE model. Now let me tell you a little backstory, because this idea goes back to when I first started working, Mike, in University of Missouri in 1986. There was a ag journalist in the Midwest, the name Kingsbury. Ring a bell, Mike? Remember that? Mike, I mean, he had this kick. He was on this kick. And intensive grazing was really kind of beginning to roll. And the thing that I remember he said, and maybe I'm misquoting him, was that if you intensively graze, you can double your stocking rate. And it just, frankly, the topic that theme made me mad, because as a forage scientist, I know that tall fescue, for example, in Kentucky is a 3 to 4, maybe 5 ton per acre plant. Putting more fence doesn't make it add more yield. And frankly, a forage system at its basic is a cow or a steer or whatever, alpaca, Morgan's alpacas, that weigh something. They eat at a percent of body weight a day, and that adds up to some pile of feed by the end of the year. And an acre of grass or whatever will grow X in a year. And if they match, you win. If they don't match, you make adjustments. Well, that is not a native skill for me. I can't do that in my head. Those of you, Jason, that have been farming for a lifetime, you know, I got to have this many bales of hay. This patch will last me till June. Then I got to open up this over here. Well, what I can't do in my head is that. So Gary Posler at Kansas State University had a little model called Graze More Beef, anyway, it was a little model. You put in the fields, you put in the cattle, and it did the math. Drew the graph, showed you where you were long or short. Came to Kentucky, I talked to a programmer into taking that logic and making a little one. NRCS grabbed it, put it into a spreadsheet model, which is even better, but that model wound up not working on modern computers. It had a Microsoft issue. So what they let me do was go back in and work on the backside, change the forage data, put my forage data table in, make sure that the monthly production curves were right, and then we got a real simple animal model. You put the animals in. They are this many pounds, this many head. They eat at 3% of their body weight a day or whatever you say. And then it just looks at, month by month, am I long or short? That's all it does. Ultra simple. So what I want to do, and what's written up in your proceedings, is a screen-by-screen walkthrough as if you were doing this on your home farm. And I do want to thank Chris and Ray for the forage data. Adam Jones is our NRCS grazing specialist here in Kentucky. Evelyn Denev is the smart person that can program this thing and do the magic on the Excel side. And it's been a pleasure to work with them. It is a simple Excel spreadsheet. It's small. I can ship it to you in a heartbeat. And it is going to be publicly available. It will be what their technical service provider people use to then plan grazing systems when they come to farms, okay? So let's get started. This is the data entry side on the livestock. You can see that, let me find the pointer. You can put in this case, I was testing it out, right? I put in a menagerie. There's a little bit of everything here except Morgan's alpacas. And so you've got the head. What's that? There's room for them. They're just not there yet. Okay, then we get the weight, and then the intake rate is you pick. right? We suggest 2.6 for year-round, 2.6% of their body weight a day, okay? One of the things that we want to avoid with, and by using a tool like this, is overstocking, running out of grass. So if you can fudge here and plus that number up a little bit. I was working with Jesse Raymer to get some of his seasonal dairy cows accounted for, and we were just using a 4% intake because they're going to eat a bunch, and you don't want them to run out of food. So you go through you number the pounds, because it's a real simple model. It takes the pounds times that percent of intake, and that's how much feed they get per day. That's how much feed they're going to eat. Now, how much we have to put on the plate for them to get that much, that's another story. Then it goes through the math. Now, I should tell you, stocker line could be any seasonal animal that comes and goes on the farm, okay? If it's beef cattle, we typically call them stockers. You buy them typically in the spring and sell them in the fall, but you could do that anytime. You have to choose, if you want to put 50 of them on, you have to choose which month they're going to be on the farm, okay, with a yes or no. And because they will gain weight they're supposed to, right? They will gain weight over the time you own them. You don't want to pick their beginning weight to allocate feed. You want to pick at least the middle point, okay? So here we go. We have our menagerie. The farm is ready to run. Let's move to the next tab, which is the forage tab. You can put a field identifier on every field, or just a number to keep track of it like I've done here. You pick the acres. There is a place to put in soil suitability group, and that is also called pasture and hayland group. It's out of the web soil survey. If you are unsure of yours, just choose one or two. What it's designed to do, it's NRCS's way of avoiding a mismatch. In other words, alfalfa on a poorly drained soil. If you make that combination inadvertently, a little yellow thing will pop up and say, please make another choice. You know, it's not a good match. The next column is the management level, and this is another place to just fudge. If it is a good producing field and you know, not many limitations, then just pick high. What that means is it goes to the lookup table, and then it takes what we call the maximum attainable yield. Now, it doesn't mean the record yield, but it means what we can get year in and year out on a well-managed field. We typically pick those numbers from things like our variety tests. If you pick medium, that will dial it down to 90%. If you pick low, it dials it down to 80%. Okay, it's just a way to attenuate what you think that field is going to do. You pick the kind of forage in the next box, and if those were blank and you put your cursor in there, it'd bring down a little drop-down arrow, and I believe I tried to illustrate that in the talk, but then you'll get the list of 26. Yours may not be there exactly, but you'd be surprised how little difference there is in the month-to-month percentages with cool season stuff. I mean, tall fescue red clover is like tall fescue white clover, is like orchard grass white clover or red clover. Now the yields will vary with those, but the percent by month doesn't vary very much if you're looking at cool season species. Grazing efficiency is one of the neat things about this, because you think back to, you know, my motivation for even thinking about finding a tool like this in the first place is, what difference does it make if I do a better job grazing? What difference does it make on my carrying capacity? Does it, in fact, allow me to carry twice as many? Well, it could if you were that understocked to begin with, right? So here you go. You can make a run using continuous grazing as your base, and that you say, there's a table on the right that gives you some guides. But we would say continuous grazing might only harvest 30 or 40% of the annual yield off that field. What the model will do at the end, and I'll tell you the punchline now, is that no matter what you put in here, it will run 3 scenarios for you. It will tell you a stocking rate for a 1,000-pound animal at 30%, 40%, or 30%, 45%, and 60% grazing efficiency or utilization. So you can do your actual run, but then at the end, it's going to tell you what difference it would make if you went basically from continuous to some sort of better grazing system, strictly on carrying capacity, okay? Carrying capacity. So, all right, so there we are. Our menagerie is built. Our forage fields are built. We've got a mix of, well, fescue and alfalfa, big blue stem, and Indian grass, one of my personal favorites, and then Bermuda grass, bluegrass, white clover for my horse friends, and then small grains to maybe give me something in the early spring. The next couple of screens are just mainly summary screens, and they don't really tell a lot more of the story. But should you be expecting forage to be produced in one of these months and a 0 shows up, let me see if I can find my pointer, there it is, then you can go back and make an alteration in your forage plan at any time. This is tab number 6, and it does then begin, so first place that it puts the animal numbers with the forage numbers, and the important parts are at the bottom. This percent, well, difference plus or minus in pounds, this line, going there month by month. Then it does the accumulated balance. In other words, we're gaining ground in up to August, and then we begin to go backwards a little bit in the latter part of the year. And of course, Jason, you could have told me, right, that in September, October, we're going to have a problem. So now I can prove it, right? Now the green is a place you can go and there's a little bit of tweaking you can do to help yourself. You can go in and add if you're having to bring hay from another farm and account for it in the green. It's just mainly when you enter it here, it saves it and it puts it on the summary sheet, okay? And it lets you value the cost of that. Of course, there's also, you can sell excess hay, and that's what this model assumes, that if you don't graze it in a given month, that you capture it as hay, and you've got it then to feed. Okay, my favorite page, tab number 8, which visually shows you that, you know, all that hay you make in May, June, July, and then that you may have to do something else in that part of the year. What I didn't really call out is the fact that we're adding stockers here in October, November, December. Arguably not very smart time to add stockers if you're trying to grow feed year-round for them, but it does show you what the model does then with animal intake, because we rock along fairly consistently with our menagerie, because we're keeping them year-round, right? They eat every day. Then we add the stockers and it kicks up the dry matter needs. So here's a quick way, and I've run a model like this so many times that most of our forage systems in Kentucky will run out of gas September, October, November. And when they used to make pasture condition scores or take them with the Ag Stats folks, guess which month had the lowest pasture condition score in Kentucky historically? October. It was typically the worst. So, it's a visual way to tell you how far short you may be, right? But it also is a challenge to us to say, what can we do here to not have this big deficit, right? More acres, less cattle, or less animals, and so on. And I just blew up the graph. At the bottom of of the visual graph is a table that gives you the needs and what you produced. And this system wound up being pretty close on paper, 29 tons short, but that's not the whole story. You got to feed them every month. So you then go back and say, okay, what can I do to grow more in the fall? And then it has a summary page like this. The green boxes are the places you can value hay that you sell off the farm if you had excess, and value that feed or hay that you had to buy. So it tells you about your system, and then it does the plus or minus in terms of the dollars you had to expend to make it right, all right? And I'll go to the next slide. And here's your, the what if carrying capacity at 30, 45, and 60, 1,000-pound animal, and it does the math, and it tells you how many 1,000-pound animals that forage system would carry at those 3 efficiencies, okay? So this is just a simple summary. It's a simple model, and there you go, there we go. So what we did, why did we do this in the first place? The interface was a little bit kludgy, and it didn't really work on 64-bit Microsoft computers. This runs on Apple iPads and Microsoft computers, Apple computers. We updated the forage list, updated the yields, updated the monthly production, and it makes all these calculations based on the average year, average rainfall, doesn't account for stress or anything else. So again, it's a tool that NRCS will be using. It's publicly available. You let me know and I'll send you that and you can use it. I mean, it's ready to go. So, Chris, thank you. All done.